Today is July 19th, and there are two important days that we, Luchadores Solidarios, celebrate each year. It was in 1979 when the Sandinista revolution triumphed in Nicaragua, and also when PICAS was born as a solidarity committee with Central America. In human years, 43 is about half a lifetime. A lot of men and women have been part of this journey. A lot of memories have been built, and yet a lot more needs to be fought for. I'll keep silent to play this song from 1979. Let's think about all the brave women who have led this organization. And why only women? Because tonight our main guest, Judy Blankenship, will talk about another brave woman who is part of the liberation war of our continent. Give me a second and I will play the song for you.
Mire, compañero, la verdad es que no se puede hacer la revolución sin la participación de las mujeres. En el ejército de Sandino, María de Altamirano, Conchita Alday y Blanca Arauz. Y en nuestra organización, en el Frente Sandinista, Luisa Amanda, María Castil, Claudia, Arlen, Mildred.
Barranco, hermano de viento, de canto y de luz, decime si en tus andanzas viste una chavala llamada Arlenciú.
Yo vi de Sensontle, amigo, una estrella dulce en el cañaveral, saeta de 1000 colores, dentro de los rumores del pajonal.
Enterró en el hueco de su guitarra el lucero limpio de su corazón. Se fue río arriba pa' la sabana como un lirio de agua serenito. Dice Martiniano que en la montaña revolucionario todo es allí. Que anda clandestina una mariposa y su responsable es un colibrí. Que anda clandestina una mariposa y su responsable es un colibrí.
Barranco, ay, usted perdone mi curiosidad, cómo era la guerrillera que según sus señas pasó por allá.
Le cuento, Sensontle, amigo, que donde la chinita peleó hasta el final, nació un manantial quedito que a cada ratito le viene a cantar. ¡Échale!
Enterró en el hueco de su guitarra el lucero limpio de su corazón. Se fue río arriba para la sabana como un lirio de agua serenito. Dice Martiniano que en la montaña revolucionario todo es allí. Que anda clandestina una mariposa y su responsable es un colibrí. Que anda clandestina una mariposa y su responsable es un colibrí.
On this song, I like the part where it says a butterfly is clandestine and her responsible is a hummingbird. That's really beautiful. Ana Margarita Gastiazoro was clandestine, while her commitment with the liberation war in El Salvador demanded it. It was not an easy life as she discovered all the sacrifices that way of life demanded from her. But the worst was about to come. She was captured by the Guardia Nacional, one of the most brutal military forces in El Salvador at that time. How did I learn about her? Well, that belongs to PICA's historical anecdote archives. It was in the mid-90s when I joined PICAS as a volunteer. It was there where I met Judy Blankenship. We collaborated writing articles for the newsletter Central America Update. It was there when she talked to me about Ana Margarita. For a reason that is hard to understand, I still remember looking at the newspaper the day she was arrested. Perhaps it was her name, which is not very common, or perhaps it was the fact that she belonged to an upper high-class family. I mean, she was not another usual leftist captured. She was valuable as to fill the front page of the main daily newspapers. That's all I knew about her. How would I know that more than 10 years later, I would meet the person who was capable of recording hours and hours of conversations about Ana Margarita's life? How would I know that when Judy left PICAS, she would give me a box containing information that more than 30 years later would become a book? Here we are today celebrating PICA's 43rd anniversary. And here we are with our guest, Judy Blankenship, former PICAS activist, who will talk about her finished project, the publication of Ana Margarita's life, Tell Mother I'm in Paradise, Memoirs of a Political Prisoner in El Salvador. After Judy's presentation, Karen Oliva Cispes will talk briefly about the current situation in El Salvador that is unfortunately similar to Ana Margarita's story. After that, we will have Q&A and discussion. We invite you all to share your thoughts. Our last speaker will be Paige Cheryl Sperling. You already know her. Current PICAS activist. She will briefly talk about Colombia, the GM Workers' Struggle podcast, and what the arrival of Gustavo Petro would bring to the future of that country. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce our guest, Judy Blankenship. A formal introduction requires me to know her professional and her activist life. And even though I know a little bit, I prefer her to tell us who she is and what she has done. I just want to share an anecdote that at this time makes me laugh, because if it weren't different, I would be paying remorseful consequences. When Judy left PICAS, my English as a second language was in its infancy. I remember her telling me, Dago, this is Ana Margarita's material, publish it. And it took me more than 30 years to try to materialize that order. Around 2016, I got in touch with Juan José Dalton, the son of the most famous Salvadorian poet, Roque Dalton. I talked to him about publishing Ana's memoir, and he asked me the right question. Has it been published yet? Fortunately, I found Judy in Daniel's Denver's Facebook friend list, and he was nice to put me in contact with her. In an event that happens once in this universe, once in our lifetime, when I called her, she was sitting in her bed reviewing Ana Margarita's material. What a coincidence. From then on, the project of translation started, and in 2019, the book was published by the Museum of the Word and Image of El Salvador, run by Carlos Ponsalvi, Santiago, former Radio Venceremos broadcaster. Why is there something funny in the story? Because what Judy told me was start translating, not publish, nothing close to publish it. I'm glad I did not make that mistake. Returning to that serious part of the event, I will share the following song that talks about a clandestine couple that are taken apart when they are arrested. Enjoy it. After the song, we will hear from Judy.
Con los brazos abiertos nos despedimos, los brazos
brazos abiertos y enredados en cuerdas de acero enredados, los brazos abiertos y los ojos quietos. No pudiste callarte en mi silencio, no supe atarme a tus manos, no alcancé a decirte no me esperes, ni a saber que me decías hasta pronto, pero pude sí crecerme de a poco, en lo blando de tu luna increciente, siempre estuve abrazándote de adentro, más maduro cada mes y menos roto, compañera, nos hicimos uno al otro. En la dulce celda oscura de tu vientre, compañera, nos hicimos uno al otro. En la dulce celda oscura de tu vientre, nos encontramos con los brazos prolongados, tus muñecas maniatadas con las mías, con los lazos diminutos de las manos, 9 meses de encarnada rebeldía, compañera, nos hicimos uno al otro. En la dulce celda oscura de tu vientre, compañera, nos hicimos uno al otro. En la dulce celda oscura de tu vientre.
And there we go. Okay, Judy,
Okay.
you are on.
Okay. Let's see. Shall I do the speaker view? Is the speaker view on?
I can take care of that.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to see you, and it's wonderful to see people that were there when I first joined in '93, I think it was, and then younger faces. And it's wonderful to know that PCASC lives. We're here today, I'm here today to celebrate 2 books, 2 versions of the same book. The first one is Tell Mother, I'm in Paradise, Memoirs of a Political Prisoner in El Salvador, based on the oral history of Ana Margarita Gastiazoro, and edited by me and by Andrew Wilson. And díganle a mi madre que estoy en el paraíso is the book that was published in El Salvador with the translation that Dago started all those years ago. It went through many iterations before it finally came out in 2019. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we've got the 2 books. Oh, and by the way, this is only available in El Salvador, but I'm in the process of making an ebook with it, which should be out in September, October. So Dago had given most of my history when I arrived here in Portland in 1993. So I don't need to go over that again, but it's significant. When I came to Portland, I had been out of the United States for 18 years, 10 in Canada, 6 in Central America, and 2 in Ecuador. So, and I was fired up after all those years, and out of the US. I hadn't planned to ever come back, but I happened to have met my husband, Michael, in my years in Central America, who's from Portland. So I ended up here in '93, starting out again in a new life here. So PCASC was a part of that. I don't remember how I found PCASC. I remember the office was upstairs on Hawthorne. I'm sure some of you remember that hot place, Hawthorne. And I was involved for, I don't know how many years. I can't say, maybe 3, 4. My focus was on Ecuador again, because my projects that I had left in Ecuador were calling me back. So for that, though, I have to go back to Toronto, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history, which is how I got to Central America. So I immigrated to Canada in 1975 as basically a political act. There was still a draft. I had a young son. Nixon was just out of the presidency, and I was living in Buffalo, near Toronto. And so I immigrated to Toronto very happily. And it was really exciting times. This was 1975 to 85 were the 10 years that I was in Toronto. So it was an actual, how shall I say, it was sort of, it's where I became an activist. And so there were all kinds of solidarity activities going on. There were a lot of Latin American refugees. There were Chileans, there were Argentinians, there were Nicaraguans, El Salvadorans. There was the Latin American Solidarity Community. There was South Africa Solidarity going on at the time. The women's movement. I became a feminist socialist in Toronto, and I worked with the Women's Press as an editor for years. At the same time, I was teaching at the University of Toronto in a special program that helped, that sort of prepared students to go into a 3-year undergraduate program if they didn't have a high school degree. And I began to study documentary photography. And all of these things were sort of important to prepare me to branch out on an adventure. My son was getting ready to go off to university. And by 1985, I was really ready to, well, my goal was to go to Nicaragua. There was something about the triumph and the fact that it was sort of the center of so much exciting activity at the time. It's where I had wanted to go, but I applied to CUSO, which is the acronym is the Canadian University Service Overseas. It was an NGO, somewhat similar to the Peace Corps, but not connected to the government, it had an arm's length relationship with the government. It was much more to the left. And they said, we don't have a job in Nicaragua, but we have a placement in Costa Rica. With the CUSO, you had to be basically hired by a local NGO. And so I was sent to work with Alforja, which was a center of Educación Popular. And they had organized, Alforja was an organization that was in Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras. In those years, Guatemala was too dangerous for our kind of work. So, and mostly I was working as a documentary photographer in those years, and mostly in human rights. There were a lot of human rights groups in exile in Costa Rica because of the wars in El Salvador and the repression in Honduras. And there was also a lot of leftover exciting things going on from the Costa Ricans who had been involved in the Nicaraguan conflict. And some of them had been in Nicaragua and come back to Costa Rica. Some of them had come from Chile, from Venezuela, it was just a soup of really, again, Costa Rica was a very exciting place to be at that point, to be an activist. So at any rate, and also I was just learning Spanish. I'm looking at my notes here. And I met Michael, who was traveling through Costa Rica. I'd been there for a year. He was the guy from Portland traveling to Brazil. And So I grabbed him and he's still with me. He's downstairs right now. So and that's why I'm in Portland. So I had a colleague there. His name was Andrew Wilson. He's the co-editor of the book. And one day Andrew said, I have met a really interesting woman. And this isn't part of the official story, but they had dated briefly and they were sort of like oil and water. And he said, well, we're not going to make it dating, but will be a great friend. And I think you'd like to meet her. So he arranged a dinner. We all met and Anna and I really clicked. Michael and Anna, they were the two foodies. They really clicked. And Andrew was this wonderful sort of overall presence bringing us all together. So I'm going to read the preface, my preface to this book, which sets the scene for what happened next. So it's just a couple of paragraphs. And it also introduces you to Anna at the time. When we first met in San Jose, Costa Rica, Ana Margarita Gastiazoro was just 36 years old. Beautiful, vibrant, intelligent, curious, full of life. It was late in 1986, and she was working as a translator and Spanish teacher at a private school. I had come to Central America the year before with a Canadian NGO to work as a photographer and adult educator. We connected when a cooperant from the same NGO, Andrew Wilson, met Ana Margarita and invited us all to a dinner party where she and I found we had a lot to talk about. The friendship and collaboration between the three of us, four actually with my new partner, Michael, endured until her death 7 years later. In those first months, as I got to know Ana Margarita, she told captivating stories of her life from her childhood in an upper-class Salvadoran family with a religious mother and a liberal father who insisted she be educated at the American school in San Salvador, to her turbulent adolescence and awakening social consciousness, ironically through the influence of Maryknoll nuns in Guatemala, to her young adult years of political activism, including an underground life in war-torn El Salvador. She revealed that she was a United Nations she revealed that she was a political refugee in Costa Rica, documented with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. In El Salvador, she had been disappeared for 11 days in a clandestine jail cell of the National Police before she was imprisoned without charge for 2 years in Ilopango, the notorious women's prison. She told these stories with exquisite detail and humor, but an underlying melancholy suggested a deeper narrative. One benefit of her refugee status was the services of a psychiatrist who helped her deal with the trauma of her arrest and 2 years in prison. When I proposed we get together regularly and tape her life story, she readily agreed. So this was the beginning of our documentation project, we would say, but also a very deep friendship. Every Sunday we would meet. I was working full time, so these were Sunday evenings or Sunday afternoons, and we would meet in my office, and I had a pretty nice little Sony tape recorder with cassette tapes, and she would tell another chapter of her life. And Andrew got involved transcribing. These were all, of course, you know, they had to be transcribed word for word. So he got involved transcribing, and we would print them out on our dot matrix printers. Remember those? and read them back to Anna, or she would read them. And then we would go back and fill in gaps in the story, saying, you know, this happened, and then you jump to that, what happened in between. And so we worked together, the three of us worked together, I would say, I think about 3 or 4 years. I'm going to go back to my notes now so I don't get off. So in about 88, 89, Anna moved to the Caribbean. She went on a vacation at the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica, and she came back and said she'd met this wonderful man, Smokey, and she was going to realize the dream of opening a restaurant in Puerto Viejo, where she went to live with Smokey, and they did open a restaurant. And I just want to say that all of these, there's a lot of photographs in the book, and you will see Anna in her restaurant in Puerto Viejo. So in 1990, Anna was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the next year, Michael and I left Costa Rica and went to Ecuador for a sort of, for me to do an in-depth documentary project in an indigenous region of Ecuador. And Anna and Smokey came to visit us once. And the peace accord, they came in, I guess, 92. The peace accords had happened in El Salvador in 92, and Anna was invited back to run for office with her party, which Anna's life in Ecuador, in El Salvador, had been as an activist or a member of a legal party, the MNR, but she also at the same time was an underground operative, as were many people in those years, and many people lost their lives for doing legal work as well as the underground work. So Anna came with Smokey to visit, and the next year she died of breast cancer. Anna was only 42, and that was she went back to Costa Rica and then back to El Salvador, where Andrew visited her one last time. And she died in January of 1994. At the time that she died, I remembered something that she had said as part of her story of her growing up. And that is, her father, whom she loved and who was a liberal man, said he was very sorry, but with 3 brothers, he had to pay for her brothers to go to university because they would have families that they would have to support. But Anna, beautiful girl, you're going to get married and your husband will be responsible for you, so I can't afford to send you to university. So in Ecuador, mourning Anna's death, I thought of the idea to create a scholarship fund in her name, as an education fund or a scholarship fund for education in her name, for women's education. And all these years later, this is now a foundation for Cañari women to get university educations. And it is officially the Ana Margarita Gastiazoro Fundación para Mujeres Cañaris a ir a la Universidad. And we have 25 graduates in all fields, from medicine to dentistry to nutritionists, accountants, nurses, and 3 with master's degrees, and the first going for her PhD. So this is Anna's legacy in part. Also, I was going to mention, during those years in Ecuador, I published 2 books with the University of Texas. So this one is Cañar, a Year in the Highlands of Ecuador. About my first, I had a Fulbright in 2000, and this reflects that year. The first time we spent a full year in Ecuador. And then we bought land and built a house in 2005. And this is our house in the clouds. And since 2005, Michael and I spend half of every year in Ecuador. So 6 months there and 6 months here. So I want to fast forward to 2017 to explain how this happened. I was at my collection of work in Ecuador will be collected at the University of Texas, and I was at a conference in Austin in 2017, And I met at that conference a man from El Salvador, Carlos Consalve, AKA Santiago. And he was the person behind Radio Venceremos during the war. He was one of those who had come from Venezuela to fight in the struggle in Nicaragua. And after the triumph of Nicaragua, he went on to El Salvador and worked throughout the war there. And he is still there. He's quite a charismatic, wonderful person. And he created the Museum of the Palabra, let's see, the Museum of the Word and Image, El Museo de la Palabra y Imagen, MUPI. And when I told him the story of Anna at just at, the intermission of the conference, he said, fantastic. He said, we really want to publish, MUPI publishes books. We want to publish books that highlights the role of women in the war. And Anna sounds like a great story. Send me a proposal. So at that point, we didn't have the manuscript or even a proposal in Spanish. I should go back and say, Anna, Andrew, and I always thought of this as a book, and she was clear about that up until the time of her death. She had mentioned to me on that last visit in Cuenca, Ecuador, that she regretted that we hadn't done the book in Spanish because she said, my audience is in El Salvador, and the reason we didn't was that my Spanish was just beginning, and her English was perfect from years in the American school of San Salvador. So here we had wonderful interest in publishing the book in Spanish, but that is about the time that Dago called me after 20 years. And as I remember it, he said, do you remember those pages you gave me of Anna Margarita back in PCASC in the 90s? And he said, I want to start translating them. So there began a process of a couple of years of Dago, and also Anna's cousin worked as a translator on the manuscript. And in 2019, the Spanish version was published in El Salvador, and Andrew and I we met Anna's family. At that point, I'll get to the English version in a minute, but at that point, the English version was beginning to be in process, but we did need permission from Anna's family to go ahead with the contract. And so there the family story is a whole other story. I'm not going to tell now, but they turned out to be a wonderful collaborator after years of, I think, feeling that Anna was the black sheep that had brought a lot of trouble onto the family. And I think when they came to the book event at the MUPI, at the museum, where there were a couple of hundred people, and there were women who had been in prison with Anna. There was her partner, Sebastian, who figures in the book. He was there that night. We met. In some ways, it sounds trite, but this was sort of Anna's living history. Her sister, who is a nun, who's an Opus Dei nun, was there and paid for the reception. Her brother is an Opus Dei priest in Honduras. He came. Her two other brothers, who are business people, were there. I mean, it was that sort of an event. And we also at that event announced that all of the royalties from this book, the English version, would go to a similar scholarship fund for women's education in El Salvador. So it was all beautiful. Now, by then, but to go back a little bit before that, one of the things that I did a few years ago was I digitized Anna's tapes, and the system I was using was real time. So I was listening to Anna 24 hours. We have 24 hours of tape, and I did it over a series of weeks or maybe even months, but I was listening to Anna's voice tell these stories. And I thought, again, you know, we really need to try again to publish this book. And we had tried, and we had tried off and on in the 90s. Well, right when Anna died, we sort of lost our heart for the project. But then Andrew and I had gotten organized in the late 90s and looked for publishers, left-wing publishers, at that time mostly interested in sort of on the ground struggles by, if it was a woman's story, and there were quite a few oral histories then of autobiographies, it was women on the ground in the war, and an upper class Salvadoran woman we didn't get any takers on that. So listening to her interviews, listening to her voice, I thought, again, we've got to try one more time to find a publisher for this story. It's so important. So this time we struck gold. And I'm very happy to say that part of striking gold with the University of Alabama Press is the editor who's here with us today, Wendy Schnaufer. And I didn't expect Wendy to be here. And I'm so pleased that I get to say this to everyone, that, you know, to write a cold letter or cold email to publishers, it takes days to compose a letter of what you want to say. You want to get their attention for a few minutes. You want to, you know, try to present the story as something that they would want. So I had sent letters out to the usual suspects, which were the University of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nebraska, and someone had suggested the University of Alabama. And so who knew? So I sent the letters out, and Wendy, the editor, the senior editor at the University of Alabama Press, answered within, unheard of, within, I don't know, Wendy, 2 days, 3 days. And she said, this is great. We're interested in women's stories. We're interested in our Latin American list. Send us a full proposal. So this really activated Andrew, who was by then living in London, and I was still here 6 months and in Ecuador 6 months, but we really got organized that we needed this encouragement. We made a full proposal. We followed all of the sort of protocol to get research who the audience would be. And we made a formal presentation to the University of Alabama. And so we were offered a contract, and that was then takes us up to our trip to El Salvador, where we met Anna's family. And I think by that time, Anna's family realized that Anna was not just a black sheep to their family. She was a real heroine, a part of the war and the triumph and the peace accords. And I don't know if I mentioned before, when she knew that she was dying, she had been invited back to be a candidate for her party. And at any rate, what I want to end with is I want you to hear Anna's voice, because we have a recording of her reading the first introduction, the first few paragraphs of the introduction of the book. And I should say the book is available at online, all the online sources such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but also your local bookstores will, if they don't have it in stock, they will order it. And we're hoping to have enough sales for a paperback within a year or two. So let me get this recording. If I can, then can I, Nan, if you are there, I just want to reduce my, okay, I got it. Reduce my screen so I can get back to the recording. Okay, here we are. This is Anna reading the first couple of paragraphs in the introduction to the book.
Would you like us to send a message to your mother? The secretary of Ilopango prison asked me. I stood uncomfortably before her, holding a newspaper in one hand and a plastic bag in the other. The newspaper's front page had a 2-column photo of me under the headline, "Terrorist Confesses." Plastic bag held all my possessions at home, a bar of soap, a roll of toilet paper, and the clothes I had worn for 11 days straight in the Guardia Nacional headquarters during my interrogation. "We could let her know that you're here," said the secretary. Mother knew already, I thought. I'd seen her the day before. She and my brother Javier. Somehow, Javier had got one of his highly placed friends, maybe Vides Casanova himself, the commander of the Guardia, to let them into the headquarters to see me. It was absolutely unheard of, but they managed it. Since I was arrested, the Guardia had been trying to convince me that my family had abandoned me as a traitor, and that they didn't care if I was alive or dead. I never quite believed it, but now I knew it wasn't true, and my heart was full of love for them both as I prepared to be admitted to prison. Javier had spent the whole visit in a small dark room scolding me for not accepting my interrogator's offer of exile. My mother had spent the whole visit crying and telling me to be strong and to believe in God. The family solidarity, though, offered unconditionally across a huge chasm of ideology and past arguments, gave me strength. I think they knew I was going to be moved to Ilopango. After Javier had finished telling me what an idiot I was, he said that at least the National Guard couldn't kill me now, not if he and Mother had seen me alive. So I was going to prison, which he said I deserved. I wonder if he thought I deserved the final beating I got after they left, the one to make me sign my confession. Yet I found myself feeling strangely optimistic as I thought about what I wanted to say to my mother. For a second, I thought that I could send her a message like, "Cada momento, cada situación es tu trinchera. Every moment, every situation is your trench in the war." But our relationship was not about that. I didn't have to make her suffer about my relationship with the revolution. I thought about it. I looked at the floors of the Ilopango prison. I felt actually happy. I felt I was not close to death anymore. And I said, "Yes, please call her. Please tell her not to worry about me anymore. Tell her I'm in paradise now."
Thank you very much. It's been great to, I'm sorry I don't get to see you in person, but this has been really very, very important. And I'm here in Portland and I'm ready to rejoin PCASC. So if it's all right, if I'm only here for 6 months of every year, I would like to be a part of PCASC again.
What is, Judy, just a question, what is a memory that gets stuck in your mind when you think about Ana Margarita?
Well, Ana Margarita and I were friends in the way that women can be friends with one another. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to answer this exactly the way that you're thinking, but it's the most intimate sort of friendship. And you don't have that many in your life that you meet someone that you feel like completely comfortable with, that you want to know for the rest of your life. And I think one sign of that is the fact that I still miss Ana. And when I hear news from El Salvador, when I hear news about the politics there, when I hear news mostly about the politics, and I think how much I know that Ana would have been there in the midst of it, and that she would still be a good friend. So my memory of her is just the openness of a wonderful friend. And I think you can hear that in her voice. You know, she was just beloved by everyone who knew her. So there's a lot of other memories that I won't talk about, but that, you know, moments that we had that are not so happy, but I'm not going to talk about that.
No, yeah, that's I was in the meeting at your house. I met Andrew. That, I mean, we worked together and I didn't know him until I went to your house. And we were sharing a lot of memories about that time. And to me, learning about Margarita was also an opened my eyes in some other ways, because she was a member of the upper class family. And it's funny, when I was doing the translation, because in El Salvador, we speak Spanish, right? But we also have different versions of Spanish. If you belong to the upper class, you speak like tú, tú, tú. But if you're in the lower class, you talk about vos. And then when I was translating the book, I used the tú when she speaks. But when she went to Ilopango, and I know the women that went to Ilopango, and I know how they speak, then I use the vos. And I use those versions of the Spanish. It was kind of going back and forth and thinking how she might, how the whole conversations developed. And when you show the book, or the book in Spanish, the title, it says, díganle.
Oh.
Díganle a mi madre.
Yeah.
Díganle a mi madre que estoy en el paraíso. There's another, the same book, the same front page. He said, dile a mi madre que estoy en el paraíso. So I don't know who came up with that dile, because I remember translating díganle, but that is the two versions of the Spanish we speak in El Salvador. Anyway, to me, it is a very good experience. I appreciate what you brought me up to, and you put me right in your project, and I appreciate that. But I mean, I like the way you created the foundation in Ecuador. By the way, this shirt is from Ecuador. This shirt is from Ecuador. Yeah. So I like the foundation that you have created with Ana Margarita's name, and the way that I didn't know that you have helped 25 women so far, and then you are getting masters and your first PhD. Wow, that's a great of accomplishment. So anyway, I'm gonna open the conversation to everybody who can say or make a question.
And Dago, we also have Karen here from CISPES, so I'm not sure how you want to do that.
Or you want to, can we go to Karen and then
Or people can also just put in the chat if they'd like to ask me a question in the chat, which I'm watching. If time is an issue, it's 8:15. So also I'm going to put my information in the chat. I'm available for, chats. I'm available. I have a website. I'm here in Portland until December, and I'm happy to meet anyone who would like to talk more about the book or Anna. So I'm going to do that right now.
Okay, thanks, Judy. If that's the way we're going to work, and then I will welcome Karen Oliva. She is a member of CISPES. She will enlighten us with information about what's going on in El Salvador. There's a lot of prisoners right now in El Salvador. There's an exceptional regime that is trying to eliminate the gangs activity, but in that process, a lot of people who doesn't belong to the gangs have been put in jail. So, Karen, you're welcome to begin your presentation.
Thank you, Dago. And thank you everybody for the space. I'll try to keep it brief because I know time, right? And thank you, Judy, for sharing about Anna. I appreciate it, especially the audio. So yeah, my name is Karen or Karen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizer with CISPES, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. And I'm just going to share a little bit of context about what's going on in El Salvador currently. Which, like Dago mentioned, is unfortunately not too dissimilar from, what was going on in Anna's youth. So currently, the Salvadoran people are facing an increasingly fascistic leader and government. Throughout Nayib Bukele's time as president, he has gradually escalated the levels of political persecution, and to the point that now there is, like what I mentioned, a state of exception law. So currently people are living under the 4th month of a state of exception law, which itself suspends many constitutional rights, including the freedom of assembly, the right to defense, and has led to the arrest of over 45,000 people. The president publicly said that he would not be satisfied until they reach 50,000 people arrested. And so we can see that he's well on his way to accomplishing that. And what's really scary about the state of exception is that it allows people to be arrested without a warrant. So like Dago mentioned, the context for the state of exception law is, so the law was passed back in late March in response to, there was a weekend, I think it was March 26th, that weekend, there was a spike in homicides, gang-related homicides in the country. And so in response, the administration put forth this state of exception law that would allow people to get arrested by the police without a warrant. And like that also mentioned, that has led to just the arrest of thousands of innocent Salvadorans. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who have faced the brunt of this have been young people, youth of color, and I've heard of, people who just have tattoos, they get targeted by the police. I was actually recently in El Salvador this past weekend. I went with my family, and my cousins, young boys, like adolescents, they were stopped at a retén, so like the military police checkpoint, and they were asked to get off the truck and to take off their shirts. And they were inspected to see if they had tattoos, and they were also interrogated by the police and asked about like where they were going and what their names were and all that. So yeah, this has become very common. And when I was there, and also just from what I've heard from compas on the ground, it seems like there's, unfortunately, has created this culture of fear amongst the population, which has a fear of speaking out, about why this is so atrocious. And the administration has done a pretty good job about shifting or shaping the narrative of the state of exception law, pretty much saying that, this is Bukele trying to find the solution finally to the gang problem. Like, this is the solution. We're just going to arrest everybody. The people who are getting arrested have been labeled as terrorists. And people who are critical of the government or who are critical of the state of exception law are supporting terrorists and also can be arrested because you're supporting terrorists. And so it's become just really, like I said, this culture of fear where even just protesting it can lead to people being targeted and being arrested. And so it has also, I think, reinforced this culture of like punitive punishment, and has really, I think, taken advantage of like the harm, that Salvadorans have suffered for years, and all of that intergenerational trauma that folks have still from the war and till now with like the gangs and the harm that folks have suffered from the gangs. And so it's using that to the administration's advantage to make it so that the state of exception law, though it is seen as like a negative thing, a lot of people are afraid to speak out against it. And what's important to note, I think, about the state of exception law is that it's not just a single occurrence, but it comes after a series of escalating actions of political persecution. And so I really want to uplift today COFAPES, which is the Committee of Family Members of Political Prisoners in El Salvador. And COFAPES was formed last year, shortly after, actually, we're about to go, I think July 22nd marks the 1-year anniversary of 5 former FMLN government officials who were unjustly detained and have been held in pretrial detention all this time, so for a year. 2 of them, though, were released under house arrest, but still no trial. And so shortly after that happened last year, COFAPES was formed, and they have been very active in denouncing these human rights abuses at the international level. They came to the US recently to meet with Congress members to, inform and bring attention to this growing fascism in the country. And COFAPES, when they have explained the situation in El Salvador, they have their analysis has been that this attacks against the population have come in different phases. So the first phase was attacking the political parties. So when Bukele was running for office and during his early years as president, he really did a point about turning the population against the other 2 political parties, the historic right wing Arena and the historic leftist party FMLN, and portraying them as they're the same thing. So he started out by attacking the political parties and singling himself out as like the solution. And then shortly after, he started to attack historic institutions like the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, the Supreme Court, and he started to take over the branches of government. And so I want to say last year were the Legislative Assembly elections, and his party, Nuevas Ideas, won a supermajority in the Legislative Assembly. And then with that win, they were able to replace all the Supreme Court magistrates with new judges. And so now he essentially has control over the 3 branches of government. And not to mention media outlets, of course. And so that was another phase of his governance. And the third phase was attacks on targeted opposition. So like what I mentioned last year, the 5 former FMLN government officials who were arrested illegally and are still, like I said, being held in pretrial detention. And now with the state of exception law, it's basically attacking the entire population and imposing just fear amongst people. And let's see. So not to take up too much time, I want to just close out with saying that even though there is this culture of fear, I want to also uplift that there has been so much resistance. Even starting like last year in the fall, there was a lot of protests with thousands of people coming out. This past May 1st, International Workers' Day, there was a big mobilization that came out. And so people are actively resisting. And like I mentioned, the group COFAPES, there's also other groups that have formed since Bukele came into power that have been denouncing his government and just being very vocal. And like I said, right now it's a very scary situation. Like COFAPES members have shared that they have been followed by unmarked vehicles. They're definitely being surveilled. The one thing I didn't mention is with the state of exception law, it allows the police to be able to intercept any phone communications without a warrant. And so, it's for sure, like almost guaranteed people are being surveilled. So yeah, it's a very difficult situation, but the Salvadoran people are holding their ground and resisting it. And so CISPES, in our work of accompanying this fight to defend political prisoners, we currently have an action to call on the Senate particularly to withhold military and security aid in their budget. And so in the coming weeks, the Senate will be finalizing their proposal for next year's budget. And so right now we are trying to flood their inboxes with in order to pressure them to cut this aid. And actually, as a result of our campaign on the House side, they included new restrictions on police and military training in Central America, which is really great. It's not everything, you know, we hope for, but it's a move in that direction. And so now our focus has shifted to the Senate. So I'll be sharing in the chat a link. If you haven't taken that action already, I'm sure some of you are probably on our listserv, but it will take you to a page where you can send a pre-written email and make a phone call, and it'll have a call script for you and also a voicemail script for you. And the other thing I wanted to mention before signing off, closing up, is that this Sunday, CSPS is hosting a teach-in with COFAPES members, and it'll be Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And so COFAPES members are going to be diving more into what I just shared today, into these mass arrests, the struggle of political prisoners in El Salvador, the growing militarization, which I didn't really even fully touch on during my short presentation, but they'll be diving into that. And of course, also looking at the role of the United States, because the US continues to be the biggest financier, I always have trouble with that word, financier, of the Salvadoran police and military. And so it's important, you know, for us to use our position as people living in this country to call out the US's BS. So I'll be putting the link in the chat as well to that event. So if you're available, I encourage you all to join. The COFAPES organizers I really admire them. They're really courageous in the work that they're doing. And I think that they're able to explain these things in a very clear way. So I hope y'all can make it. And I'll also put my contact info in the chat in case anybody wants to connect. So thank you again for the space.
Thank you, Karen. So thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy, for being with us. She is leaving right now. So, and thank you, Karen, for giving us a brief information about El Salvador. Do we have any comments or ideas before we go to Paige, which is our next?
Judy, would you be able to stick around for like 5 more minutes if people have any questions for you?
Certainly.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Come on, come on. I love somebody said Ana Margarita presente.
Yeah.
Who was that? That
Wait.
that brought back a lot of memories of those years in Costa Rica. Thank
Yes.
you. Yes, Natasha, is it? No, Natasha, yes.
Okay, thank you, gracias. So I was wondering, so that's a children's book, the second one?
Oh, well, it's not exactly a children's book. It's
Okay.
aimed for younger readers, but it's not a children's book, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, and you said that's only available on a PDF?
It's only available in El Salvador, but I'm in the
Oh.
process of laying it out as an ebook. So we're
Great.
going to hope to have it up for a very reasonable, as low as possible price.
Uh-huh.
So it will be available to everyone in Spanish in September, October.
So you'll notify PCAST when it's available?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading it to my grandchildren.
Oh, great. Yeah, it'll be fun to hear your voice, giving Anna Margarita's voice, because yes, anyone else? Question?
Well, I had a question. This is Dan. I'm sorry, I was trying to copy stuff in the chat and put it over into a file I could use later. One of the questions I have about is, you know, we've been dealing with these wars from the 1980s, 70s, and 80s for so long, and you're telling this history is so important for people at a time when you're talking about, you know, how these governments were so oppressive and silencing people. Our government right now is doing that here by trying to stop people from being educated, from attacking attacking studies. That I remember when I I took in a refugee from El Salvador and through the sanctuary movement. And when I was being told at the time was, you know, our fight, we will fight the war there, but you need to change what's happening in America if we're going to stop this shit from happening anywhere else. And so there's, how do we not just take these messages and these lessons that we learn, but how do we apply it here? Because what I'm seeing right now is the very shit that was happening in El Salvador and Nicaragua and other places that they never thought was going to come here has happened. And we have domestic terrorism and shootings, mass shootings going on in this country. And they're doing that to scare the shit out of people who speak out. And people are afraid to go to demonstrations and afraid to be in large communities. That plus COVID and everything else. There should be lessons. These lessons should be somehow telling us how we're going to be dealing with this stuff that's happening right here in America too. Yeah, any feelings by you? Anything you can comment on that?
No, I will only say I am sickened by what is happening in the United States right now. Enough said. Thank you for saying all of that, Daniel.
You want?
Any other questions? No?
I have not a question, but a statement. So, and it's for you, Judy, before you take off, you said that you were interested in reconnecting with PCASC, but also for everybody else. We are gonna start doing one meeting a month where we just bring in news from different Latin American countries. So if you wanna, get on a Zoom call and just like sharpen your political analysis by hearing about what is going on basically in all of the countries of the region, we're gonna start doing that. So
that's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Put me on the list.
Perfect.
And actually at a later meeting, I'd be happy to talk about Ecuador and what's happening in Ecuador.
It's very exciting what is happening in Venezuela. Democratic Socialists of America, DSA Portland chapter, co-sponsored an event with 3 Venezuelan feminists in early June as part of a East Coast and West Coast tour. And there's a lot of good organizing going on. Those women were very dynamic. And we got about 55 people turn out at Tabor Space. And it was interpreted by native speakers.
Great, great.
And also remember that we are celebrating our anniversary, and also Sandinista Revolution is celebrating their anniversary. And it's, when you think about Latin America, I mean, we know a lot of things about Cuba. We know a lot of things about Venezuela. We know a lot of things about Ecuador. When you talk about Nicaragua, it's like, what's going on in Nicaragua? And it looks like the budget is not enough. The budget is not enough to make the big news that they are doing. But the attacks against Nicaragua are sometimes blind us. Anyway, that's we have a friend in Nicaragua, which she is from Portland, and she is working now with the ATC, Asociación de Trabajadores del Campo, and she said, well, Nicaragua is the most sung revolution. And there's a lot of music about Nicaragua's revolution. And at the end, I'm going to play Alforja Campesina. And the reason I'm going to play Alforja Campesina is because when Judy was making her presentations, who mentioned alforjas. And alforja is something that you put on your, that goes from your front to your back, and then you put a lot of stuff on it. And campesinos use them a lot. So I'm going to finish this whole celebration with Alforja Campesina and other music from Nicaragua. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of things going on in Latin America, and sometimes we are blind by the corporate media, and our analysis sometimes get disturbed by that media. Anyway, yeah, Paige, we are going to see how we can break a little bit about that. But anyway, any other comment, or can we go to Paige? Or can we give a big applause to Judy so she can go to her duties, and also we can
Yes.
stay with the left fist saying Ana Margarita presente.
Presente.
Margarita presente.
Thank you so much. And I hope to see you all in one form or another. I'm here in Portland till December, so let's connect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. La lucha continúa. So this is kind of exciting. The feelings gives us more energy. Let's see what is next. Paige?
I think so, yeah. So just to kind of transition a little bit, I did want to mention that the PCASC was contacted by the Port Workers Union in Colombia because they're a Secretary General of one of the ports of the Union for the ports in El Salvador has been accused under the same law. So I just wanted to say, like, it's also affecting, as you probably imagine, unionists that are, in this case, standing up to privatization of the port. So we're all connected. But anyway, to begin talking about Colombia, and John Walsh, I know you're on this call, you might want to jump in on this too, but we were very pleasantly, we got the pleasant news, Gustavo Petro and Francia Marquez, they were able to win the presidency and the vice presidency. And that's so exciting. You know, no president is ever going to be everything that you can imagine. Nobody is perfect. And certainly there were deals that were made with a big, wide, you know, political grouping of different parties in order to be able to get all the voters in. But certainly the people that have been appointed have been pretty promising, and it makes a big difference. PCASC has been working in Colombia, supporting the injured Colombian GM workers from General Motors since 2011. And basically those are workers that were injured on the job. They were fired from their injuries. They set up tents in front of the US Embassy after going through all of the channels through their government. And so they've been resisting for 11 years. This is August 2nd is going to be their 11th year anniversary. And we are coming out with a podcast all about that struggle. I can put it here in the chat so that you can find it. Let me just find that real quick so that you have it. But you can just go to the website www.injuredworkers.world and you can find all of the links there. But essentially, we're trying to tell this labor story from a perspective that is more like a social justice suspense thriller rather than like a labor history story. And so we're really excited about that. I'm about to head to Detroit to do some audio work with the people that have been involved there over all of these years. But it has been just a huge learning opportunity, I think, for PCASC to see another way that we can do solidarity, because I know that in the past we've had like big manifestations in the street. We've had, we've been able to move a lot of people. This has been a different kind of support. This has been like using the power of our organization, working with other organizations around the country to write letters, to be able to show that there are US organizations watching. We've been able to hold off eviction attempts that different governments have tried to do of the tent encampment. We've been able to, basically get these cases in front of the Constitutional Court, almost like getting it selected before the Supreme Court. It's a big deal. And we've been able to win those cases. And so I know that, that letterhead, that PCASC letterhead with the letters that we write and we send, just being able to show that there's attention from the United States and from Spain and from the other places that we've been able to organize has made a big difference for the workers. So that's basically what I want to share, is that the workers continue strong in their tent encampment, resisting General Motors. I had the opportunity just a few weeks ago to speak with a worker who had been there prior to the destruction of the union within the plant. And he was describing conditions fairly similar to what workers describe in Detroit. It's pretty fascinating to hear US workers basically being told that they have to accept concessions in order to be competitive. And you ask yourself, well, competitive with who? And it's competitive with workers in other countries, like in Colombia. So when you have workers that are standing up to the very worst conditions, standing up to a corporation that has decided to injure workers as part of its business plan, that's very important for US workers, it's very important for Colombian workers. And I think it really just shows that we're all in this together, and we really can't do it without everybody. Along with this podcast, I'm hoping to interview people that have been involved in PCASC in the past. A lot of the work that we've done has been really built on the shoulders of the work that came before. So I would love to incorporate those stories in. So if anybody is interested in that, I would love to talk to you.
Okay. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Karen. Is it time to close up with our last song, Dago?
Okay.
Alforja campesina pinolera, sos el mero escapulario de mi tierra. Cuando vienes del pueblo bien cargada, me pareces a una indita embarazada. Alforja campesina proletaria, olorosa trigo nuevo ya quebrada. Yo te quiero por ser hija de mi brazo, hermanita menor del calabazo. Dicen que en el Chilamate Juan Carmenate murió, los pocoyos siempre cantan donde el campisto cayó. Ya viene la fiesta de agosto, ya los chinamos están en pie. En la baja el gallo giro que a don Casimiro le merqué.
500 pesos al gallo giro.
¡Hoy Milan Rojo! ¡Go, go!
Échale, Mielitza.
Alforja campesina pinolera, sos el mero escapulario de mi tierra. Cuando vienes del pueblo bien cargada, me pareces a una indita embarazada. Alforja campesina proletaria, olorosa trigo nuevo ya quebrada. Yo te quiero por ser hija de mi brazo, hermanita menor del calabazo. Novia linda es este broche, un regalo para vos, una flor de sacanjoche que corte en la cuesta del Coyol. Yo te ofrezco en esta ronda mi inflamado corazón, que es una alforja redonda cargadita de ilusión. Alforja campesina pinolera.